Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cherry the Geek TV. I'm Joe Vanourney. Today we are joined by Nick Holt, who he is the director of a new film called AI, Probably Nothing to Worry About, which has its world premiere today, or actually tomorrow, Saturday, June 6th at 5 p.m. at the Tribeca Festival, with additional screenings Sunday, June 7th at 11:15 a.m., as well as Thursday, June 11th at 8:15 p.m. Uh, it will also be playing at DC Docks on June 12th. Nick, welcome to Cherry the Geek TV.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
So set up the film for people. What's the premise of the film?
Premise is this is the film about the guy that created AI in short. He's a man that was considered Geoff Hinton, he's known as the godfather of AI, but he was considered a crank working on the margins of computer science for decades, 50 years. And people thought he was mad, that he was trying to build a thinking computer. And then eventually he did, and he cracked it. And from being an outcast, he got a Nobel Prize. And now he thinks he's that we've created a species. He thinks this isn't just technology. He thinks it's the creation of a new life form, and no one's going to know what to do with it. And now he's concerned and very worried about the hand he's played in bringing this technology to being.
Talk about the origin of the film. Why did you want to tell this story? How did he become on your radar? Kind of what inspired you to make
Well, I
this?
think that I think what you can do with AI films, and obviously AI is everywhere, and you can run towards the sort of the vanguard of what the technology is doing and what it's about to do next. And it's always in the news and the media, the next cycle of the capabilities getting better and better. But we sort of ran in the opposite direction, and we went back to the source and to try and look at where did this come from and who's at the heart of it. And there's no one on the planet that's better, is more knowledgeable or informed than Geoff. And so we thought if we could make it a personal story and keep it quite focused, then by understanding its origins, you'll get a really good handle of where it's going. And you can sort of see in the story that Geoff's created this like little jewel of intelligence, and then everybody wants this jewel for their own purposes.
So you're talking, of course, about AI pioneer Geoffrey Hinton, who went from being considered a fringe crank to winning a Nobel Prize, and now he questions what he has unleashed. Talk about him. What is it like meeting him, talking with him, and what was it like capturing his anxiety on camera?
Well, it's a good question. So Jeff's unique. I spent 2 years researching this, and there's a lot of corporate messaging out there. These are big companies, the biggest companies we've ever seen, with huge PR departments. Things have to be on brand, on message. There's a lot of money at stake. Geoff doesn't give a hoot about any of that. He's been there, done that. He is at liberty to say what he wants. He doesn't work for anyone anymore, and speaks his mind, and that's really refreshing in this space. So he's an incredibly interesting guy. He's obviously, well informed, but also very not frightened of sort of addressing what's ahead, and he's very concerned.
He suggests that the artificial neural networks have effectively birthed a new species that could outpace human intelligence. As a filmmaker, how do you visually and narratively capture a threat that feels so invisible and abstract?
That's a good question. It's almost like some sort of dogma rules. You're never going to see it. You can't get your hands around it. It hasn't sort of fully arrived yet. So how do you depict it? And I think the key is you just make it a sort of dramatic human story. So we've done a few things. I think the creation of AI in many ways is like the adolescence or the toddlerhood of it. It's got this mirrors this human development from sort of, you know, fetus to like growth to birth. And we use these chapter headings in the film because, again, I think we hug this idea of the creation of a species. No one embodies that better than Geoff, that it's the creation of what he calls, an apex species, this intelligence that's just going to grow and grow and grow. So we charter it like that in the film as far as, the parents, Geoff, and then the birth, and then sibling rivalry with the various companies, and then interaction. So despite the fact that AI is quite conceptual and a lot of the threats and the dangers feel like conceptual, we filmed a couple of examples where, for example, I mean, it's a well-known case of chatbots being used by vulnerable adults and teens. And there's the case of Megan Garcia, whose son Saul, fortunately, took his own life after prolonged conversations with a chatbot. And you can sort of see there how these sort of AIs were toying with a vulnerable teen, and where that ends up without guardrails or safety in place. So you can get a sense of that. And then we've also we've had a bit of fun with various sort of clips to just try and get a sense, movie clips to get a sense of, this has been something that people have always dreamed about, creating this sort of, this scientist narrative of creating something like out of nothing, and then what does that do? What's the dangers inherent in that, giving something all this power? So I think visually it's quite a rich film, and we've really tried to make. We've got a lot of archive as well from that we've sifted through, and you can sort of see how OpenAI and Musk and all of these forces have come to try and use Jeff's creation for their own purposes.
Uh, AI has always kind of been a trope in a lot of sci-fi movies and end of the world scenarios. Terminator, for example. Uh, you reference what people have always kind of perceived as the sci-fi movie version of AI. What was it like as a filmmaker, knowing that that's a lot of what a lot of people grew up with is those images? So you have to reference them, but you also don't want to play into that, and you want to keep it more like that's one version of it, the movie version, but here's the reality version. Kind of talk to me about balancing that viewpoint that the
Yeah, yeah,
casual
yeah. I think
moviegoer would know.
I think you're right. I mean, Hollywood has been fantastic at visualizing artificial intelligence and robots, for decades. Terminator, as you say, and automaton machines, and that go way back. And I think what we've got here in a thinking computer is another version of that, where it's not embodied in the same way that, say, robots are, although that's sort of coming quite quickly, I think. But at this stage, it's the intelligence that it's the sense of intelligence. And in the film, we've got various people who created it, having conversations. And in those conversations with the AI, you can get a real sense of how capable, persuasive, it is. And so we've leaned into that actually with we've got Amanda Askell from Anthropic, for example, who's in charge of Claude's personality. Um, and in itself, that's quite a unique job role, to be in charge of a personality of something that's being created in real time. And we can see her interact with the model, which is extraordinary, and then move it a bit left, move it a bit right. So we've captured those sort of interactions quite well, which I think work. And as you say, it's sort of we've yet to see how it's really going to sort of land, but I think there's enough even in the interactions people have with it that you can see huge, huge, tremendous power of this thing.
In addition to Hinton, you kind of look at the other side, right? And you talk to a lot of these tech titans like Demis, Hassabis. What was he like? What was your take on him? And how difficult is it to get these highly protected, powerful figures in the tech world to open up to you and show you transparency?
I think it's difficult. As I said, there's a lot at stake. I think these companies look at how their message can be, how helpful it is taking part in documentaries, what's in it for them. Um, I think they're all different in a way. Demis, DeepMind's just down the road from our office in London, and he was, I think, happy to help. And Demis is like Jeff, has been at this for decades, not years. He's been talking about AI for a long, long time, since his early 20s, and probably imagining it before that. I remember him saying there were meetings that he was in when he was trying to get funding for DeepMind, where people were just looking at him blankly, going, "What's AI?" And he had to spend a lot of time explaining what it could be. There's no business model, there's no money, he couldn't show them anything, but he had a deep belief in it. And I think Demis has always sort of looked for AI as a sort of sense to explore the tree of knowledge, questions at the center of the universe. He's deeply, deeply inquisitive about, the mysteries of science, physics, etc., etc. And I think he sees it as a hugely powerful tool to help us explore this. Others less so. I don't know what. I think the Sam Altmans of the world came to it slightly later. Elon Musk didn't have a clue about it until Demis spoke to him about it, and then you've seen the way that's played out, as far as him wanting control the creation of OpenAI as a direct answer to a counterbalance to Google. And so I think there is, everyone's got their own sort of wants and needs from it. And I think, some people didn't take part because I think maybe this wasn't a message, this wasn't on brand for them potentially. But yeah,
You kind of
that's where
just
we're at.
touched on this, but I kind of want you, I'm gonna kind of fine tune the question and see if you can get a more specific answer to this. The film focuses heavily on the intense rivalries and competing egos between the visionaries and the tech brokers. In your eyes, is the AI race being driven more by a desire to help and solve humanity's problems? Or is it more driven by corporate and personal hubris? Or is it a bit of both? Some are doing it for some reason. You kind of touched on that in the previous answer. Are some people doing it for one reason and others for the other for hubris?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. What do people want from this intelligence, this jewel? What do they want it to become? What's on offer? And I think the stakes couldn't be higher. I think, whoever controls this technology, whoever wins this AI race, as they openly talk about, has unlimited power, the most power that I think we've seen yet. Um, it's always fascinating to be, I think we are seeing the first draft of history. Everyone talks about this as a transformative technology. It's like being alive during but electricity's first being used, or the Industrial Revolution. We are seeing the first draft of the most powerful, consequential technology that I think, and I don't think that's hype. I mean, it might have been used to be hype, but as the time goes on, you can see how this is going to alter society and the economy. So each of these titans, as you say, these tech titans, know that the world is on offer. They can be men of history. They can be, I think some people see themselves as potentially, the Newtons of their time. And so I don't know what the motives. I mean, people have talked about the motives in the film. You can get a sense that some people have got a sort of more of a pursuit of science. Some have got a pursuit of power. And I think when you see the film and you see how these people have sort of behaved so far, I think you can get a good sense of where it possibly could be heading.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the team that are behind you as far as the producer team. Specifically, I noticed Barbara Broccoli, the James Bond. Everybody would know her as the James Bond producer, is one of your executive producers on the documentary. How did she come on board? What does she bring to the table?
Well, I mean, the Bond franchise aren't shy of a villain trying to take over the world. Maybe there's a bit of overlap. I'm not saying who that villain might be at all, but you know, big stakes. A lot at stake. So she'd worked, I think, with one of our producers before, and they had a good relationship. And I think she's a big fan of documentaries. I think she likes to back films that she feels are interesting and important. And she saw an early draft of the film and really liked it, and has just been a huge support since then, really. And she's been a joy to work with.
What would you say was the biggest challenge in the putting together the documentary? And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe what was something that you thought going in was going to be a challenge and it ended up being a pleasant surprise? Like, oh, this wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think the challenge was making a film about something that's sort of constantly evolving and changing, a subject that can feel a bit overwhelming, like it might have left a lot of people behind. But I think, it was always in the news cycle, AI this, AI, you don't need to turn the page of a newspaper and there's an AI article. But I think, and so the challenge was getting to the heart of the story and making it quite human, making it something that my mum could watch and engage with. And I think coming across Jeff, some of the personal stories in here, was a huge breakthrough as far as him being able to communicate the boat that we're in and the boat potentially that we could be in, um, and making it and sort of seeing the creation of this sort of, not as a, but as a sort of a vying of power and a vying of sort of the, control, and no one really understanding what we've unleashed, the sort of genie out of the bottle. And so I think making it a sort of dramatic, story in those sense, rather than just, oh, look what it can do now, or isn't it powerful? Feels like nailing that and making that and mainlining that in the film has been relief.
What was your personal view of AI going in before you started making the documentary? What was your opinion on it? And did your opinion change over the course of the film, talking to experts as you made it? And how did your opinion evolve from then until now?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know much about it. I started it over 2 years ago, and I didn't know what a language model was. Didn't know what the term LLM was. I hadn't really clocked. In the UK, you'd say Demis Hassabis to people, they wouldn't know who it was. They wouldn't know Jeff Hinton's name back then. They wouldn't know Sam Altman's name particularly. It's difficult to remember how quickly this has moved from ChatGPT's launch in November 22. We're talking about, years, not decades, and it's just moving so fast. And when I first started researching it, people were talking about artificial general intelligence, artificial, super intelligence. No one talks about that anymore. It's almost like it's here already. So it's moving so quickly. And I just thought it was going to be exploring a very, very powerful technology, in the hands of, these incredible engineers. I always remember someone saying to me, it's in the hands of, say, 300 engineers. It's like the NFL draft. These guys and girls are supremely bright and capable, and this is their moment. They're creating something extraordinary. And then, so I thought, oh, maybe it's going to be, maybe it's going to be sort of quite dry and scientific. But then I think when we spoke to Jeff, and we sort of, in particular Ilya, who's one of Jeff's, Ilya Sutskever, who was co-founder of OpenAI, and you sort of see how he frames it as far as creating this digital neural network, basically creating a digital brain. Jeff was fascinated with understanding how the brain worked, so he set about trying to build one. And then when you sort of see it framed in that sense of creating a brain, creating an intelligence, you realize that where are the limits? In our heads, we've got this 3.5 pounds of this 20-watt wet computers, they call it, and then they've made a network, they've made a digital brain now. That's just only going to get better. It's only going to get stronger and more efficient, and it doesn't sleep. It knows everything about everything. And, when you understand that, which I think what we learn in the film is this creation of, then I think, your imagination can just run wild. It's like, where does this go? It could go anywhere.
I was wondering if you could comment on AI as it pertains to filmmaking, because as with every industry, when talking about AI, you're going to have both sides talking about it. But it seems like a lot of people, majority of the people in the artists, the creative side, are against AI. Where some of the tech people, James Cameron, and for example, they're like, oh, it's not going to be bad. This is the future. This is where we're going. So, but as as a filmmaker, is AI a tool to help filmmakers, or is it a replacement to
Well,
take jobs
yeah,
away from people?
I think you're right. It's sort of everything starts as a tool, doesn't it? And then it becomes, it'll just morph into it. Like, film industry's all about technology and technological innovations, from sound to cameras to film to digital. It's ongoing, and I think any tools you can use to tell human stories. I mean, I'm just personally interested in the human stories. I think that's what's unique. I think in this rapidly advancing age with AI, I think remaining human, I think that's the last thing that we've got, really. And that's the one thing that it might, I mean, God, it might not replicate. But I think with real emotion, you get drama. And I think if you can keep a hold of emotion and things. So, AI has obviously arrived in some ways. I've not embraced it or used it hugely, but what it can do in sound, or, from recording to clearing things up, it's incredible. But I know it's moving rapidly. But for me, it's personally, it's just it's there in the background to clean things up as and when you need it.
You've made statements that you think that both AI optimists and AI skeptics will both be unsettled when they watch the film. What do you hope the audience, you're having your world premiere tomorrow, what do you hope the audiences take away with them when they walk out of the theater after seeing it at Tribeca and at DC Docs?
I think my hope is that people go away sort of much more informed about where this has come from, and that they understand what we've unleashed. They understand the genie that is now out of the bottle, not in terms of what it can do to cleaning up your inbox, but in terms of the brute power of this intelligence and how it's just going to grow. And I think they'll be able to take from it, depending on their own sensibilities, the huge good it can do. We see in the film, Demis Hassabis is using it to cure diseases as people are, a lot of the firms are. And also the great harms and the great dangers. And I think just sort of raising the collective awareness of where we're at. I want people to come away, ideally coming into this going, I've heard about it a lot. I know what I've sort of heard about AI, but really leaving understanding a lot better.
Well, so what's next? We know that it's playing at Tribeca. We know it's playing in Washington, D.C. on June 12th. If people want to find out more about the film, future screenings, where it's going to end up, streaming in the future, where can they, is there a website, social media? How do they find out more about the film?
Yeah. So I think if people want to find out more about the film, we've got on Instagram where AI underscore probably nothing to worry about, and the same on X. And that's the best place to go to as far as upcoming screenings and where the film will be showing next and various, updates about the project.
Awesome. It was an amazing documentary. AI, probably nothing to worry about. Uh, Nick Holt, thank you so much for chatting with us today on Cherry the Geek TV.
Great. Thanks very much for having me. Bye bye.